what makes us really unique. As far as we know, no one else does that. It's kind of a little bit scary for some winemakers because effectively putting the blending process firmly in the court of someone that's not a wine professional would sound a little bit counterintuitive. Us winemakers get a bit precious about our talents in tasting and blending and think we're kind of special most of the time, and nobody can do what we do. What we're trying to demonstrate to the consumer is that everybody has the ability to smell and taste wine and to discern what's good and what's not. Everybody can be a part of this. Everybody can understand it.
Sit back and grab a glass. It's Wine Talks with Paul K.
Hey, welcome to Wine Talks with Paul K. And we are in studio today in beautiful Southern California, about to have a conversation with Tim Lightbourne and Rob Cameron of Invivo Wines, bullshit free as it were. Hey, don't forget to give a review. If you have something nice to say, go ahead and say it. If you don't bother. And subscribe to the show. That's how the podcasters keep things going. But I appreciate you listening today. But not why we're here. We're here to have a conversation with Rob Cameron and Tim Lightbourne. See, I did it opposite this time. Of Invivo Wines. And I just have to ask, what does bullshit free mean?
Mostly bullshit free.
I mean, you don't see that a lot on websites for wine, wine vendors and distributors, et cetera. So I thought that was an interesting thing. But yeah, I mean, peel it back a little bit. What part of the industry are you addressing by saying that?
Look, I think we wanted our wine company to be fun, approachable, not too stuffy. So, that one of our lines is 100% bullshit free, which we put on the back of our label. And it's mostly bullshit free. So
is that a New Zealand thing? Like, we're just going to cut through this thing. I mean, New Zealand has some pretty amazing wines, but I get the strategy. I think personally, the wine industry self-propagates the aristocracy of wine in that mode, and by talking about the character and the cedar and the Pinot Noir flavors and the strawberry and all the things that go with describing a wine. You agree with that?
Yeah, look, there's always a place for that type of terminology, and I think for us it was finding our place in the market. We launched 15 years ago. We didn't have hundreds of years of family generations of winemaking history, or plenty were talking about terroir and all that sort of stuff. But we needed a unique positioning. We needed something that was us with this brand. So the 100% will be yes free. We say that's part of one sort of cog in it about how we approach this wine world.
It's changed a little bit now, but when we first started, before we first started the business, a lot of feedback we were getting from our friends, with younger people at the time, was, they kind of liked wine. They wanted to like wine, but they felt like it was really hard to like it because there's this sort of barrier to entry with, all this jargon and being able to smell this and taste this. And they felt a little bit excluded from that. So we wanted to make wine that our friends, our mates would drink, and we wanted to help, bridge that gap in knowledge and blow the whole thing up, make it easy to understand, make it simple, make it fun. I mean, at the end of the day, it's wine. We're not saving the planet. We're having good times. So, we don't have to make it more difficult than it needs to be.
It's an interesting thought. And I frankly, personally, when I hear influencers, which is another great term in our industry, talk about, I'm trying to simplify it. I mean, wine is not simple in it. If you want to study wine for the rest of your life, you could, and you would never learn it all, right? And that's just the academic side, and you can do it. I mean, I've done this for 35 years. I don't know nearly anything really, when it comes down to it. But for the consumer, yeah, I think approachability is an important part of our industry to bring people to the table and go, oh, wait a minute, this New Zealand, from Marlborough Pinot Noir has really got some great character. How is that different from California's Central Coast? I think that's an important part. I don't know, the experience of wine. Has this been successful in what you've been doing to break down those barriers, or at least bring people to the table that otherwise may not have come?
Yeah, I think people have enjoyed our approach. Some of the stunts we've done over the years, we'll talk about a bit later. It's not another Me Too, another winery saying the same story. And I think not only consumers, but buyers, wine shops have been kind of refreshing, I guess, approach. It's warts and all, really. And so far, I mean, we're still here 15 years later in a tough industry, so something's working.
I did write this down because, there's so many things. We have so much to talk about. I'm not sure which direction to go, but I want to kind of focus on how you guys got here. But certainly in today's world, wine is very tough. It's tough anyway. The margins suck, as we all know. Retail sales, can fluctuate radically as they have recently, and it becomes more difficult. And we've had some serious bankruptcies in the U.S. That some serious players that had what would have seemed like had it all going on, and they failed it with doing $250 million in sales. Two of those companies, matter of fact. But I thought it was interesting. You guys started with a crowdfunded. So I've seen, a lot of crowdfunding in the wine trade, both retail. I just worked with the Bottle Shock producers on crowdfunding their new game, which is kind of cool. How did that idea germinate, and how did you think that you're going to be able to raise enough money to start a wine company?
So, this company was started by Rob and myself in 2008, and, with not much money, maxed out credit cards, and we built it up organically ourselves through basically getting reorders from any shop that would take us and not paying ourselves much over those early years. Banks weren't forthcoming. Two guys starting in the wine industry that weren't millionaires, thought we're crazy. I think we approached 4 or 5 banks, and overdraft was hard to even get for our business. So we built it up, and we came to a point where we wanted to, invest in our market. We wanted to take over a winery ourselves. We wanted to look at leasing opportunities across New Zealand, and also invest in around the world. We export now to about 43 odd countries. So I'd noticed crowdfunding happening in the UK and a little bit in the US, equity crowdfunding. So it's not like Kickstarter. People actually own a share of our business. And I noticed a lot in craft beer. So we were the first in 2015 to launch an equity crowdfunding winery opportunity in the Southern Hemisphere. We thought we'd get a couple of $100,000. We weren't sure if, we had some friends that wanted to invest a little bit in things, but we weren't sure what the public reaction would be. But Rob and I, we went out on the road for about 6 months. We treated it like a mini IPO, and went into presentations all around the country, and down in Marlborough to our growers. And we managed to, on the first day, we were already at $1 million. Within a week, we're at $2 million. So, and that was the maximum you could raise under equity crowdfunding law in New Zealand. We've since done it 3 times. We have over 800 shareholders now across New Zealand and a few around the world. We're proud of our shareholders. We've raised over, I think, about $8 million New Zealand dollars through crowdfunding. So look, it's a unique approach. We've built, this 800 plus shareholders are like our sales reps. We tell them when we launch a new wine, they're our ambassadors. We have an AGM every year with them where hundreds turn up, and even Rob is in a band, and he plays after we present the numbers and sings to the shareholders. Basically, everyone wants to get there, and obviously there's free wine at these meetings, which is probably
a great benefit. We hear Rob playing.
So everyone just wants to get the numbers out of the way and then get into the music and drinking. So yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Wine and rock and roll is my passions.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, there's a really cool facility up in Napa now. Feasted Forward it's called, and she's got this beautiful venue where she does all these amazing events that are more contemporary. We'll talk about a little bit about what's going on in the contemporary world of wine. But before you guys started this, did either one of you, or which one of you went to the shrink first, the psychiatrist, and decided that this was a good idea to get on the wine?
Yeah.
So both of us were working in London, and it just happened to be that we're living quite close to each other. So I was working for a UK wine consultancy company, and I was traveling a lot around Europe, making wine in lots of different countries and different, areas. It was really interesting. I got a really broad experience as a winemaker, and I was sort of getting ready to go back home and was thinking about starting something up myself. And Tim, obviously being an old mate from high school, and, same group of friends in London, we started talking about it, and I think we're at a party and having a few drinks, and so I thought there might be an opportunity to bring some of Tim's skills into what I thought was a pretty traditional category. So I'm a winemaker, Tim's in marketing. And, I felt and pretty quickly so did he, that there was a real opportunity, particularly in the New Zealand space, to bring some real innovation in the marketing sort of side of things. There was a lot of success with New Zealand wine up until then, and so this is kind of the early 2000s. And, the success, I think you could argue, was largely just based on quality of the wines alone. It wasn't really, there wasn't real FMCG kind of experience and skill there in delivering a brand experience for a consumer. There was just great wines being made. And there's a lot of lakes, a lot of hills, a lot of rivers, a lot of stony this, a lot of clouds this. And we thought, with younger people, trying to bring them through the wine journey and kind of get them to follow wine a little bit earlier than, say, the sort of 50 to 70 cohort, we have to do something a bit more innovative. And that was when I think Tim kind of got excited, and we spent about 6 months writing a business plan, and then probably threw that out the window as everything changed as soon as we hit the ground in 2008. But yeah, that was the birth of it, I think.
Hey, have a listen to Francesco Poggi. He is a Porto Nuevo winery, and that is the descendant or the brainchild, or however you want to call it, of the Bulgari jewelry family. It's an amazing conversation about luxury goods and moving into the wine business. Have listened to that as well. Damon Roque of Bottle Bank in Atlanta. We're talking about innovation in the wine world, and it's something we're going to talk about today. But Damon has come up with an idea, a retail idea, to store wine, serve wine, and food at an amazingly upscale wine tasting bar in Atlanta. Looking forward to the grand opening of that. But the conversation is online at Wine Talks with Paul K. We're going to talk about celebrity brands in a minute. I know you have the Sarah Jessica Parker wines and the Graham Norton. But why do all these things start with a few drinks?
Way too many drinks and like.
Every time I hear this story, it's like, yeah, we had a few drinks, we came up with this idea. It's like, yeah, it would take a few drinks to come up with this idea, but your successes needs to be noted and understood, because it's an important success story that you don't hear a lot about, and it's important to tell these stories. So, New Zealand, you call it New World. I don't know if you know this, but the Master of Wine program has dropped the terms New World, Old World from their curriculum, for whatever reasons. I don't know if it was a political thing or not, but, I think in general, the New Zealand wines, or it could be New World, America, South America, Australia, all considered New World. Partially, I think from a timeline standpoint, even though New Zealand wines have been around for probably a century or two, but also stylistically issue. I noticed your wines are bright, they're fresh, they have crisp acidity. Is that a palate-driven or consumer-driven palate that you guys are reaching to, that this consumer, the Gen X or Z or whatever letter we're on these days, is looking for?
Yeah, definitely. Within the broad range of styles that you can make Sauvignon Blanc, and we've always focused on trying to make it as approachable as possible. And one of the kind of key complaints you get about Sauvignon Blanc from people is the acidity and just being too sharp for them. So, that was always very much front of mind in terms of how we manage our vineyards and how we make the wines. It's put texture first. The acidity needs to be balanced. It's an important part of the plan, but, there's a lot of wines out there that are just very acidic and mineral based. And, that's good for some consumers, but we think a broader kind of appeal lies in a bit of a richer texture and palate weight. So that's always part of our style.
I mean, they're gorgeous. I certainly love tasting wines at 8 a.m. So that's part of the benefit of having you guys on this morning. Brand building is tough in this industry. I mean, it's very hard to get traction. There's so much competition, particularly with private brands. But you guys built a winery, and I'm not going to butcher the name. Wait a minute. Could you even talk about that on your website? You say, look, you're not going to be able to say this. And I'm wondering how you say it.
It's called Kikofada.
Right. You're right about that. So,
no,
is that what was that? You hear about Martinborough and the north of the South Island, the south of the North Island, and all the rest of it, but New Zealand and beautiful wines have come from there. Is that part of the New Zealand known for wine, or is it a dairy area? What generally is it?
It's a great question. So, we have a long wine history that actually probably a lot of New Zealanders don't really know. So Te Kaupapa is a small little rural village just south of Auckland, the biggest city in New Zealand. So it's like an hour's drive. And, the winery that we're working in was built in 1902. So it's kind of at the very beginning of our country's wine journey. And it's kind of cool because we're a really contemporary company, pretty young, and sort of, pushing that angle. And yet we're in one of the oldest wineries in the country. And what's nice about that place is that it was built by our government back in the day, and they brought out this guy, Romeo Brigato, from Italy, who was a wine expert, and they put him there, and then they basically commissioned him to travel the length and breadth of New Zealand and write a report and submit back to the government on, what's the potential commercial, outcome of some of these regions in terms of growing grapes and making wine. And so he basically wrote the blueprint for our industry. He said, we went to Hawke's Bay, it said, Chardonnay, Cabernet Sauvignon, Syrah, Merlot would thrive here. Went to Marlborough, and he was the guy that said, I think Sauvignon Blanc would work well here, and Pinot Noir. And then he went to Central Otago in the south of the South Island and said, after surveying the place, looking at weather and climate data, that Pinot Noir would thrive well. So it was 120 years ago. That was kind of the blueprint for New Zealand wine was laid out. So we're in his home and continuing his work.
That's interesting. I always find it fascinating that 120 years ago, let's say Burgundy, 1,000 years ago, that without technology, they can make these determinations based on whatever they had at their disposal to decide what will do well. And in the case of Burgundy, just, across the street, these plots of land are so different, and the monks had nothing to work with in order to determine that except the quality of the grapes. So I did a wine. I was looking through my database of the 60,000 that are in the local database here. There was only one wine that I tasted in 2006 that was marked with this district as specific as it is. Lots of Martin Burrell and Marlborough, obviously. And it was called Quarry Road, and it was a cab. And when I featured the wine, and like I said, it's probably 2006, 2007. It was pretty novel to have a Bordeaux varietal from anywhere in New Zealand. There is it still the case that
you've done research? Wow, I'm really impressed.
Yeah,
you found that wine. Yeah, well, I mean,
it was good. It was really good, actually.
Yeah, that's the funny thing that people don't realize is that region. It's kind of known for dairy, production now, but in the 50s and 1960s, it was the biggest region for growing grapes in New Zealand by far. And the bigger producers were there. It's just that history's gone now. And, went to Marlborough and Hawke's Bay in the 70s, and those regions took off. And the Lord Te Kaupapa was pretty much forgotten about. But yeah, once upon a time, it grew Chardonnay, Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon, Syrah, some Sauvignon Blanc, some Muller Turgau. I mean, all the varieties were there. So, and you can grow grapes quite happily there. The locals are, have it fondly in their long-term memories to go for the grapes that are a thing. It's just, I think commercially they work a bit better in those other areas. You get better quality, you're getting high crops, it's less inputs in terms of growing. So, but like anything, like everywhere really, you can grow grapes everywhere. It just depends on how hard you want to work.
Well, that's a good point. I just got back from Armenia, another wine district, which is kind of growing and learning. And I went to an experimental vineyard where they're propagating these ancient varietals. There's like 400 indigenous vitis vinifera wines in that part of the world. And, they're at a point where they're testing to see how these things go. And it's kind of fun to watch. And does the rest of New Zealand, the consumer in New Zealand, I'm assuming that's one of your bigger markets, do they understand the appellated differences? I'm sure Marlborough, Marlborough are understood, but do they understand these other smaller regions?
Yeah, I think largely there's good knowledge amongst the New Zealand consumer. But I mean, they're obviously very much focused on the bigger regions. But, we are lucky that we've got such, a wealth of amazing little sub-regions producing fabulous wines. So, I'd say the New Zealand consumer on average is pretty well aware of, what we can actually do as a country. And you see the wines represented pretty well across the board amongst, traditional retail and grocery, some avenues. So, yeah.
Well, it's funny, here at the club, I would taste on Tuesdays, and I always considered it sort of a temperature gauge of what's going on in the wine world, because the vendors would bring me what they need to sell. And either because they had a ton of it in stock and they needed to move it, or, it was new and they wanted to expose it. And it was a very interesting temperature gauge for particularly Australian wines, where they ebbed and flows for years. They'd be like a spike in the imports, and then also they'd disappear and then they'd come back. And the general argument was it was based on the price. But New Zealand's been pretty steady. There's been a pretty steady flow of quality New Zealand wines coming into the States. Is the United States one of your biggest markets for the brands that you have?
Yeah, it is. So for us, one of our biggest countries we export to, US, UK and Ireland and Canada would be the biggest. For the New Zealand wine industry as a whole, US is the number one market now. About 2 years ago, it overtook the UK, and Australia is our biggest export. So now the US is really taken on New Zealand wine. We're about 3.6% of the entire market here in the US, so relatively small still, but it's our biggest market.
And amongst how many brands?
Oh, I mean, there's, in terms of into the US, you probably hundreds of brands in states across the place.
No, I mean from your book.
Oh, right, into the US. So we have 3 brands over here. So our number one, obviously, the Invivo X SJP. We have our own Invivo brand. And then we also produce a Invivo Graham Norton brand, which is stronger in the UK and Ireland, but we sell a little bit over here. So our importer, Palm Bay, represents all those brands.
And then the Sarah Jessica Parker brand.
Yeah, that's the Invivo.
SJP, I guess we go. You go by SJP, or do you call it Sarah Jessica Parker?
Just SJP, Invivo X SJP. Okay. We just cut it short, but...
I mean, it's a fascinating thing. We're going to dig deep into the celebrity brand endorsements, because I've been around seeing this forever and seen some pretty bad things come through. But then there have been some lately. There's been a lot of activity, a lot of interest in this, and we'll talk about it in a second. But I did notice on one of the bottles you sent that there's some scores, and it's a controversial. It's there's conversations amongst the trade about them being less important than they used to be, and the helm has changed, for instance, at Robert Parker, so that style difference is coming up. And this is just sort of wine geeky stuff, but noticing that you stuck, put on the label the accolades that you've earned publicly, has that been for the brand? Has that been an important part of your marketing?
Yes, it has. Obviously we have Sarah Jessica Parker on board here with the brand, and that's great. And we do a lot of marketing campaigns that are different, but none of it would work if the quality wasn't there. And that's first and foremost with our brand. So we are proud, and we would put our wine up against any in the world, of those 90-point ratings, 5 years in a row, 90 plus since we've launched Invivo X from Wine Spectator, twice top 100 in the world. So, everyone can sort of say, oh, it's another celebrity brand, but yet quality, it's world class. And that's what we're really proud of. We don't have the resources of those larger, huge multinational wineries. It's this company is, it's pretty lean and mean, but why not be proud of those scores? I don't care about what everyone says in the industry about scores. We're proud of them.
Well, it's important. No, I think it's important. I think obviously quality, you wouldn't get the score if you didn't have the quality. And that's, if we can't settle on making sure that what's in the bottle is representative of what you're trying to do there, then, we're not even having a conversation. I think that's critical. And I think you struck on a very important point And that is, in the earlier days of celebrity endorsed wines, less involved, and we're going to talk about your video with SJP and tasting the blends. It was usually an endorsement. Take 30% off the top and give it to me. And I'll name one brand now just because it doesn't exist anymore. It was Fred Couples, the golfer, had a wonderful Sangiovese, incredible. I mean, it was really good. I forgot the brand who made it for him, but it was like $60 a bottle. And this is probably 20 years ago. And I think in general, the public goes to the store, they see Fred Couples and they see $60. And at that time, you probably buy Duckhorn or Chateau Montelena Estate Cabernet for the same price. You're not going to buy Fred Couples Sangiovese. I mean, you know what you're getting at these other brands. And here you have a very, very good price point, and you have the I'm not going to say endorsement. You have the contribution from Sarah Jessica Parker, and you have the quality of the wine, and you have the scores. I mean, it seems like a formula for success in that regard.
I think we've since we began our business, we've had to over-deliver on everything just to compete. There's so many. Nobody wants another wine brand, basically. There's so much out there. So everything we do, we've got no option but to do it at 110%. And so, we're basically delivering value for consumers, and it's going to hopefully bring them back. And it's been working. But like you said, building a brand, it's like trench warfare. It's,
yes, it is.
Shoot by core, sale by sale. You got to commit. You can't do it half-assed. You got to go all out.
And I think, we've come from, in those early years, set us up. We weren't given a whole lot of money at the start, which was probably a good thing because we were blind. We had to be scrappy. We had to be lean to survive. And so when we launched Invivo SJP, we had this background of, we'll do anything to make this brand work. We'll get on the road around the country. We'll meet buyers all over the place. So that's in our DNA. This is not just grabbing a celebrity. We're not an agency. We are a traditional winery. We have winery teams. We have growers. We have our own vineyards. So we needed to make it work and do everything possible to make it work.
It's interesting thought. There's, there's been some pretty bad things, but there was this actress in the U.S. called Big Ange, and everything on her was big, and her hair, her lips, her eye, everything. And she, this is the part that bothers me. She completely, on her own, probably could have destroyed the celebrity endorsed wine brand because she made these flavored Moscatos and they were pink and orange and grape colored. I was like, disgusting. And I actually had to carry them as a favor to a distributor who was doing me a big favor on another brand. And I had to actually put them in my book, and I just cringed. They were so disgusting. And, you don't need that kind of negative impression for celebrity brands. Just people like Greg Norman, the golfer, who's been very successful, makes a lot of wine, and he's part of the process of the wine. And I noticed in your video that you sat with SJP and you went through you had a cool briefcase with some samples that you had in there. I don't know if that was a prop or what, but that was pretty cool when you open your briefcase and there's your barrel samples, the tank samples. But part of the process, is that what happens when you put these brands together with Graham Norton as well, with his gin and things? Is everybody sits down at the table and tries to figure it out?
Yeah, that's what makes us really unique. As far as we know, no one else does that, and it's kind of a little bit scary for some winemakers because effectively putting the blending process firmly in the court of someone that's not a wine professional would sound a little bit counterintuitive. Us winemakers get a bit precious about our talents in tasting and blending, and think we're kind of special most of the time, and that nobody can do what we do. And what we love about it is, what we're trying to demonstrate to the consumer is that everybody has the ability to smell and taste wine and to discern what's good and what's not. And so to see Sarah Jessica work with us and Graham Norton to make these blends, and then see these blends go on to win multiple accolades, we'd like to think that shows the consumer, hey, look, everybody can be a part of this. Everybody can understand it. and you don't have to talk down to someone because they can't write wax lyrical, for paragraphs and paragraphs about tasting notes that sound like a lot of nonsense most of the time, to be honest. But everybody can agree that, hey, that one tastes a little bit richer than that one, and that one tastes a little brighter, and I like the nose on that one a little bit more. What about if we combine some of that with some of that? Wouldn't that be a nice mix? And effectively, that's what we would be doing with Sarah Jessica for 6 years, with Graham for 12 years now. And each year they get so excited about it because it's so empowering and so much fun. And it gets down to 0.5% of one addition or subtraction of the blend. It was clear as day will make the wine sing or won't. And that's just such a cool experience to do. A couple of times a year with these guys. And the other part I like personally, which is a little more selfish, but effectively a small group of people in the world of wine are controlling the flavor profile of billions and billions of bottles of wine for billions of consumers. And for me, that's a little bit, when you look at it like that, surely, getting some broader kind of intel from the market, from the consumers, to feed back into the style that you try to give them can only be a good thing. So Graham Norton, our wines we make there are mainly sold in the UK and Ireland. Well, the UK and the Irish consumer have quite different tastes to the US consumer. So the Sauvignon Blanc we make with Sarah Jessica is completely different from the Sauvignon Blanc that we make with Graham Norton. And that's in some part down to their choices when it comes to the blending table. And of course, now I know the style that they like, that I can, make the wines in the vineyards at the start, and then, make them through the young wines through the winery, and then present them with samples that are going to be in the ballpark of what they want to create. But I think that's quite a pretty cool kind of bit of intel we can get from the market and from the consumers themselves, or as close as possible.
That's an interesting point. Is probably the crux of what we do, right? I mean, because wine has always been consumer driven. I mean, you go back hundreds of years, even the thousands or so, to let's just go back to Veuve Clicquot, Madame Clicquot. She had a blend for Russia and she had a blend for the UK. Mm-hmm. And so I guess we've always suffered through or had to deal with this idea because we want to sell wine. That's what we do. But then there's this romantic idea that wine should be an absolute representation of its terroir, where it's from, and under that definition, it may not please all the palates on the street, and so we have to make adjustments based on that. I think that's why wine is so unique than any other product, and why most business school marketing plans don't work in the wine world, because it's just too unique a product. How do you reconcile that? You even on the video, which is very fun and cute to watch, but she goes, I don't like this blend, and you're like, I do like it. So how do you reconcile that with the brand representation?
Creative differences. No, that's great. I mean, that's we have 3 Sauvignon Blancs in our range. It's Sarah Jessica Parker, Invivo X, we have the Graham Norton, and then we have the Invivo, and they're all very different. So I think that's just part of the fun. And it's important to celebrate some of those differences. And it's one person's view against another. It doesn't mean that I'm right or wrong. So it's kind of, we're trying to deliver the best quality product at the best price to as many people as we possibly can. We're not single vineyard winemakers. That's a whole different thing altogether. And that's cool. We love that. There's plenty of place for that. Celebrate it for sure. But ultimately for us, our consumers are our masters. They're our bosses. So we're trying to please as many people as we possibly can.
This language of wine you brought up earlier, which I had a Bordeaux maker in yesterday, high-end Bordeaux, probably $150 a bottle on the shelf kind of thing. And he said the same exact thing. He says, I don't want to talk about it. And the show is not about swirling and sniffing. It never has been. I never want it to be, because who wants to listen to me talk wax poetic, which I'm not even that good at anyway. Much better at sort of understanding the structure of a wine. But the language of wine has changed over the years anyway, right? Contemporary language, people would think, and this is a very common theme amongst some of the influencers of the world, we need to change the language of wine. What difference does it make if you change it? I mean, my dad's language, he used to cringe when I would bring up fruit impressions when I talked about a wine with him. They would never do that in the 60s and 70s. That wasn't part of their vernacular. And then if we change it, and then people don't understand what I'm saying anyway, if I say cedar, licorice, who brought the other, oh, you know, he told me, this is very funny. He said, I had a guy tell me that this was reminiscent of northern Lebanon cedar. Who the? We're talking about bullshit free. Who the hell would know what northern Lebanon cedar smells like? But it's an important concept because there's contemporary conversations about it. It smells like Fruit Loops and Captain Crunch and all that kind of stuff.
Probably wouldn't smell too good.
Right. You would never know. It doesn't matter what language you're using. The references will always be ambiguous because I don't know what you mean when if contemporarily you say it smells like Fruit Loops. I mean, I ate Fruit Loops as a kid, but I wouldn't use that as identifier. So I think that's a really important part of what you're saying. It is bring them to the table. And wine, I want to get your impressions on this. It seems to me that what I've seen and what I'm watching is that wine is sort of going back to the story, and that we've already been inundated with, Snoop Dogg's Cali Red and all these brands that are just sugared up, shelf items. And people are a little tired of it. I'm just hypothecating here. And now we want to hear the story. We want to hear about the gentleman that came from Italy and founded this winery. We want to hear about what you guys are doing. We want to hear about the conversation with Sarah Jessica Parker to establish a conversation at the table. And you guys said something on your website. Let's bring people together to make things happen. I think that you were talking about the business side of this, but it's also part of the dinner conversation over a glass of wine.
Yeah, look, it's an important part of our business, whether it's, as you said, with customers and people that drink our wine, to our own growers, to our own team, to our distribution partners around the world. We're bringing this all together to make great things happen. I think when you talk about the blending, it was really important when we first met with Sarah Jessica there in New York. Rob and I just sat down with her and a bowl of wine for an afternoon. We hadn't created the brand for her yet. She didn't know us. She had tried our wine before, which was, it was great to hear. But we sat down and said, look, this is how we want to approach the wine world. We want you involved. We don't just want your name on the label and then, we'll just catch up every now and then and just tell you how business is going. We want you hands-on. We want you in the blending session every year. And in the blending, we're going to have cameras rolling for the entire time so we can make that highlight reel, which you've seen, of her tasting to get that authenticity of her being a part of the brand, a little part of it, in terms of, and the other things, coming to buyers meeting. I was counting the other day, she's been to over 30 buyers meetings with me in the last sort of 12 to 18 months around the country. We've jumped on trains, we've jumped on planes. She is part of this brand, and, I just don't want her standing in stores signing bottles as well. That's important, but it's not what we're about. It's more, she'll get up in a room and present the brand and the story that you talk about and how we got together and started, which is important to know. And, and it's, so far it's been working well. We work great together as a team. We're into our 6th vintage now with Graham Norton in the UK, chat show host. We've taken a similar approach, and we're into our 11th vintage, 20 million bottles sold with that brand in most retailers across both UK and Ireland. People really like that authenticity, to see the collaboration partner, because we don't really like to call it a celebrity brand, because you've heard our story about where we've come from, basically nothing, and then when we bring the talent in, it's all about collaboration and having them involved in it. They're like a cherry on top to the quality of the brand.
That was my next question, and I think you answered it, but I think I want to peel it back a little further. It is about the story, and I'm wondering, even in today's environment, when I was invited to do a speech in Pinehurst golf course on the celebrity wines in the golf world. This is probably 15 years ago. And there were 16 golfers that had wines. Fred Couples I mentioned, Greg Norman, they all, there were 16, Annika Sorenstam, and they're all gone except for Greg Norman. He was the guy that was involved with the process of making the wines. And so the question really is, can a celebrity brand survive without that participation and without that storytelling? And I don't think it can.
No, I think, to your point, consumers see through it. They, the lack of, the authenticity with the brand. No, I think that it needs the story. It needs involvement. Yes, you can get some sales if they go stand at a shop and sign some bottles, but they need to be doing that every day of the year to keep it going. I think with our approach, the quality, and the accolades, and her participation with us, it's kind of worked in that way, and you need it. I think a lot of celebrities, when they get into the industry, don't realize how hard it is. Don't realize how many are involved in it already. And, you'll be meeting a buyer and they'll have such and such a person and, well-known actor in the day before, and then someone's coming in the next week. So what makes you different to those other sort of well-known brands or celebrity brands? So you've always got to stand out and be a bit different.
We've been quite careful about who we work with, Paul. I mean, over the years, as you imagine, we've had a lot of people come to us wanting to work to replicate what we've done, and we said no. Because we work with Graham and Sarah Jessica because they're both very successful entrepreneurs, business people in their own rights, and they're committed and they have longevity. And so we wouldn't work with anyone that wouldn't be along for the full journey with us. And it's that partnership, that trust that makes it work.
It begs the question, when they come to you and you been successful, which is just, congratulations on that, because it's just hard to do in our industry. But it begs the question, do they come to you for the lifestyle of what this is, or they come to you for the profit of what this is, or they, attempted profit, or they come to you for the branding of their name to get on the street? What intrigues Sarah Jessica Parker, Matthew Broderick, Graham Norton, and the people that have come to you?
Well, we approached her, specifically.
That was so we reached out to her six odd years ago. But I think what motivates her is the ability. This business. She was interested in the wine industry. She was a wine fan. She likes drinking and learning about it and the different regions. And she'll sit and talk to Rob for a long time, just chatting wine and what's going on in New Zealand with our growers. She knows our growers' names now and all that sort of stuff. So I think that was important to her. It wasn't about money or profit. We're in the industry. It's tough to make a big profit. So she should be in something else, I think, if that's what you're after, because it's a long-term game. It's not a 1 year and sell out to whatever we're in this for long term. But I think her interest in the industry, our approach was, she could have done this with a big multinational company, but she chose us. And the way that we work, and I guess a little bit of New Zealandness sort of attribute that we had, and all that BS free and all that sort of stuff. I think that was quite interesting for her, and now she has a lot of fun. This year we sat in the middle of the New York Met Stadium and blended wine. We said, let's get out of a room, let's get into somewhere a bit unique, and we've done rugby fields in New Zealand. We've blended wine in the middle of a field. New York Met Stadium let us go in and take over the stadium and basically turn it into a mini winery for the day. She loved that. It's a lot of fun. So I think that was all the, what she was really keen to join us.
So 15 vintages with her, 11 with Graham, and then
with her this year. Sorry,
was that
our sixth vintage with her, and then 11 vintages with Graham.
I'm sorry, but the founding of the winery, you've seen. The point I was going to make was there's been a serious shift in how the consumers see wine, the marketing of wine, the social networking, influencer marketing. I did it all. I did it for 35 years. I didn't sell my company last year because I was making too much money. And after all the years I did this, and I've said this a few times, but my last full year, I sent 33 million emails out. Now, I was a retailer by trade, so it's a little bit different what you're doing, but you must have seen serious shifts in marketing these brands. And how have you dealt with that? Have you just kept your ear to the ground? What motivates you to continue to learn how to get the word out?
Yeah, I mean, we've had to be creative because we don't have huge budgets to spend millions of, in a busy wine industry, particularly here in the US. So for us, it's looking at other categories outside the wine industry and taking some ideas that we could apply. So, for example, we launched Invivo Air, an airline, the world's first winery airline. We took over a plane with a crew and branded the whole plane.
I read about that. Is that you guys?
That was us. And we're on CNN with the new airline and TV right around the world. So we served 5 wines on board that flight, and we had like vines coming down, above our head, and we branded it up. And it was the motto for the business was business class in every glass, and we had a lot of fun with that. So those sort of campaigns where it's done on the shoestring, but yet we're ending up on CNN. When there was shipping delays, Rob and I got out in a little dinghy and protested the shipping delays of wine getting to customers with a flag. And we were pictured in front of a big container ship, and we're in a small sort of 6-foot dinghy protesting that went global around the world. Wine enthusiasts posted it. I think it was their most liked post, and it was, "Where's our wine?" was what the banner said. We're out in the middle of the sea doing that. So we've done things that's a little bit different. But yeah, in terms of other, we obviously watch the wine industry as well. We collect a lot of data. We look at trends. We look at what consumers are moving towards, and obviously we're in a good space with New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. It's, as you said, it's just growing year on year. People are liking that approachable flavour. But getting out into with the videos with Graham and Sarah Jessica Park, getting those out every year to media and using different platforms and stuff is really important for us as well.
It's kind of a catch-22, right? It's not cheap to do all that. It's a lot of work. It takes a lot of moving parts, even just to produce, not even just, but the 300 emails I sent that year. You have to have a promo code, you have to have art graphics, you have to have videography, you have to have content, you have to have the how you're going to organize the sale itself or whatever you're doing. And so this is, there's a lot of work to get that. But I read that article or saw something on that flight, which is amazing. Not all of them work like that, right? You try things and they don't pan out the way you want them, but congratulations on making them work, because it's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't. I mean, social networking is the only place to go right now. You don't run newspaper ads like you used to, or there's some direct mail still done, but what you guys are doing is risky and hard to do and costs money, and sometimes it doesn't pan out. All in the effort to bring to the table a quality product that people can raise an eyebrow and say, wow, this is pretty good. We're out of time, which is hard to believe after this conversation. I hope we can do it again and catch up with you guys down the road on what's happening in your world and in branding, wine. And I've not been to New Zealand, but on the bucket list as wine districts go. But congratulations. How long are you in New York for?
We're just here till Saturday. So we're actually launching a wine-infused cheese later today with Murray's cheese. So we've infused our Sauvignon into a brie. So we're launching that. So that's going to be a lot of fun. Here till Saturday afternoon, then back on the direct flight to New Zealand.
And that's what, about 16 hours?
17.
I have to get down there. Well, thank you for being on the show today, and good luck with the rest of your trip here in the U.S. And if you're ever, of course, on the West Coast, we'd love to entertain you, open a glass of wine, and share some more stories.
Thanks, Philip. Thanks for having us on.
Pleasure. Cheers.